Welcome to the Panic Attack Recovery Podcast, an ongoing source of practical strategies and tips for anxiety and ADHD. We're a collaboration of former sufferers helping those currently struggling with anxiety, panic attacks, and ADHD so they can express their true competencies in life. Now, here is Matthew, your host.
Today, I'd like to discuss a topic that I think can be very good for relaxation from anxiety. And what I'm actually talking about is detachment, the idea of detaching from things. Because you see, one of the most freeing things that I discovered some time ago was how to detach from a negative situation and basically how absolutely freeing this could be. Just allow me to provide an example. Imagine you are at a movie theater and you're watching a really scary movie. You come to an extremely tense scene in the movie. You feel your heart racing, your anxiety levels increasing, your hands are sweaty. Suddenly, you have the realization that this is just a movie and your anxiety level decreases. I remember when I was younger, quite a bit younger, and I would be watching scary movies. I would always learn to do this process when I would become too scared. Now, unfortunately, most of us do not utilize this tendency in our day-to-day lives, but we can. Often, everyday stressful situations at work or in our own personal lives can compound on each other and our stress levels increase. The take-home suggestion that I want to give to you is I would like to encourage you to learn to detach from a negative situation, even if it's just for a minute or two. You will learn to experience the immediate relief that can be felt when you do so. Specifically, if you feel yourself getting worked up and you are ready to respond with anxiety, with anger, or any other emotional response, take the time out now. You will learn that you can do this more and more in your life. You see, many people often will lose control in situations, and this isn't just about losing control with anxiety because it works with any really emotional response, such as anger. Because what happens is the circumstances essentially take over the situation. You get so, I say you in a collective sense of people who respond this way, but people will get so worked up by the circumstances and the situation that all reasonableness is gone, and it's just purely an emotional response directly to some stimulus in the environment, something that someone cuts someone off in traffic, whatever, and then the continuous circumstances from there may get worse and worse, and they escalate. You often feel this when you are around someone who's becoming very angry. I use anger as a way to provide an example here, but it's not about anger management, although it can certainly work in learning for someone who has a problem with anger, but it's very useful for someone with anxiety to realize there's a point where you become anxious, and then you essentially feed your anxiety more and more, but also you just more or less get caught up right in the circumstances. And that's the key here, getting caught up in the circumstances. You want to avoid doing that, and that's why I'm suggesting you learn to detach from a negative situation. Now, unfortunately, I can't give you a specific set of instructions on how to do this. It's something that we all have in us, an inherent ability to detach from a situation, but we have become so habituated to responding with anxiety, as panic attack sufferers or anxiety sufferers or agoraphobia sufferers. That's our natural response, but we can learn to take a time out when we feel our anxiety getting higher and higher. And even if you just start by practicing this suggestion for a minute or 2 minutes, and over time you gradually increase the time frame, the process will work. So really, I would say that you just take a situation, any situation for practice in your life, where you feel things are escalating, whether it could be, you're getting more angry or you're getting more anxious, and you start to just take a quick time out. And over time, you increase this time out. So let's say that you are doing something and you take a minute time out one day. I'm talking about when I say doing something, I'm talking about when you're in one of these situations where you're getting angry or anxious, you take a time out. The next day, you increase the time out, maybe by doubling it if you started with a minute, and then doubling it again the next day and so on. And the idea is you can learn to take a time out and detach for a longer period of time. And what you're doing is you're training yourself to take back control, and you're training yourself to be able to do this longer. And as you do it longer, you'll realize, hey, I can take a time out whenever I want to. And it goes back to what I talked about earlier how I discovered how freeing it could be to just simply detach from the situation. Not to analyze the situation about who was right or wrong or anything like that, but to go beyond that and just simply say, I'm going to detach from the situation. And I think this is something that can be added to your anxiety toolkit, if you will. And I would definitely encourage you to remember the analogy that I used from my childhood watching scary movies. The analogy was that when you're trying to initiate the process, you think about a scary movie and you think, it's just a movie. Well, same thing. You realize this is just anxiety. This is just anger. I can detach from it. And over time, I think this is something that can be very useful for you.
Thank you for listening to the Panic Attack Recovery Podcast. Make sure that you have subscribed to our podcast and please comment and rate us on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All show notes and links are accessible from our website. Please visit our site and subscribe to our free newsletter at panicattackrecovery.com. All information has been provided for educational purposes. Please consult a healthcare professional about any disorder or condition and the applicability of any information provided in this podcast.